Proprioception. This is our ability to sense movement, action and location without dependence on visual feedback. We use this all the time if we are driving in a car and we want to be able to visually watch the road and the traffic, but we know where the gear lever is or where our feet needs to go, and we no longer need to actually look at this. Dogs also need to learn proprioceptive skills. Here is an example of a dog trotting over the poles, but in actual fact you'll see his head looking forwards to the food that he gets on completion. Particularly when dogs are doing something like agility, they are often jumping, which means they take off from the ground looking at the pole, but before they actually complete the jump, they're looking at their handlers to see what's coming next. There are two elements in teaching proprioceptive skills. Firstly, we have to look at the actual movement the pup is going to do, and then we have to build the fluency, which reduces that visual dependency. You can see in this video the pup is firstly interested in the food, and we're luring some interest over the top of the brick. But at the same time I'm dropping food near the brick so he gets a visual impression of where the brick is and then uses it to get nearer to the food. Smart pup. The more he focuses on the food, the less he's going to focus on the action pattern that leads to good proprioceptive skills. So what is he learning? Using furniture to get closer to food, that is not exactly a proprioceptive skill. What we're looking for is an action sequence that happens in a specific order. First of all, we want the dog to look at the brick, so they mark where it is, and then walk towards the brick, calculating at what point they need to put their foot directly on that brick. Once this motor pattern is learnt, we'll see the dog give a minimal mark to the actual brick and then be able to focus on what's going to happen after he has stood on the brick. We begin by teaching the last movement in the chain, that final placing of the second foot by the side of the first foot. This is micro-shaping, where we can be sure by fine slicing we get an accurate motor skill. Using an object that they step up to will give them a greater awareness of the motor skill as they develop it. But in this case, I can see that he spends most of his attention on where the food is rather than looking at the brick. So I empty my hands of food. After he's actually stood on the brick, then I will reach for the food and collect it. This is critical to use a marker of some sort to indicate that the behaviour that he has just completed is the one that gets me to collect the food. As he is learning this, he will take on certain visual reference points or navigation points to know where the brick is likely to be. Now, if we want him to focus on the brick rather than me, I need to become a variable element in the environment so he doesn't rely on presuming the brick is a set distance in front of me. We do this by beginning to vary how I give the reward. So he will be standing on the brick and I will change my position relative to him to explain that it doesn't matter where I am, he will still get the food. I also add a white tape around the brick so that it does contrast a little better with the carpet, but you can see I've changed my location quite significantly. I'm standing at the side of him and he can still focus on the brick as he approaches and then look up at me. This is where we need to learn how much our presence as the source of food delivery is going to affect the dog's learning. So here he is a year later, and he's able to approach these new platforms, quite a bit larger than the brick, get his feet accurately in place, and also quite aware of how to bring his rear end forwards so that he can sit on a backward balance. I'll then reduce the actual landing space, and we'll see him come forward and accurately bring all his body together for a sit. This is a good development of proprioception skills. So if you notice that they seem to be clumsy around objects, or they overshoot, or they crash into people a lot, then look for developing a correct action sequence whilst they build those motor skills before they start to look for the reward that they get as an outcome of developing those motor skills.